The apocalypse is coming. Are you ready for it? No. What would happen in an apocalypse? Would there be no electricity, blackouts, zombies from a chemical spillage, contamination, rising sea levels? Why am I asking you this? My name is Emma Gunn, as I've been introduced. I'm the author of Never Mind the Burdocks, a series of foraging books, and I'm here to help you survive. One thing I do believe is no matter the disaster, people tend to help each other more than not. We support each other and we give. So this is my gift to you, 5 tips on surviving an apocalypse. Tip 1, common sense. Don't eat anything you aren't 100% sure of. It's not worth the risk. Leave plenty behind. You aren't the only one trying to survive. It's really easy to overharvest, so make sure you leave plenty behind for wildlife, other humans, and if it's leaves you're picking, make sure that the plant can carry on photosynthesizing. Always collect from a clean source. This may be difficult if it's a chemical spillage, but bear it in mind. Certain plants can thrive, and also shellfish will absorb toxins. So don't ever pick shellfish after rainfall because the land is leaching out toxins into the sea, which is therefore absorbed by these shellfish. Plants can thrive in contaminated land, and also seaweeds too. So gutweed, for example, which is a type of seaweed, and also members of the goosefoot family. So be really wary when foraging. Since 1981, there's been a law in place that says you can't uproot any plant without the landowner's permission. This is common sense. You want to keep as many food sources growing as possible. Plants, seaweed, shellfish can give us so much. You can get vitamin B12 from shellfish and seaweeds. You can get calcium from leafy brassicas, sugars from fruits, and even from certain seaweeds. So sugar kelp, for example, has mannitol in, which is a natural sugar. On a fundamental level, plants, seaweeds, shellfish, and so on give us what we need at the right times of year. So carbs and starches from roots in the winter, vitamins and minerals from new shoots and leaves in the spring, and then in the summer you get fruits and berries providing us with antioxidants. Don't eat any animals with 3 legs. And last one, respect the elements. The weather can change very quickly, so make sure you're wearing suitable clothing, sensible footwear, especially if exploring a rocky shoreline. Get a tide timetable so you know when high tide is going to be, so you don't get cut off by it. And stay away from cliff tops during hurricanes. Tip 2, arm yourself with knowledge. This may sound obvious, but I'm going to delve a little deeper to help explain this. I love the inclusivity of plant botanical names. Yes, inclusivity. When I was growing up, we would move country every 5 years, and at the age of 11, we moved from Singapore to Chester. During the move, I came across a book called A Book of Potpourri, or Potpourri, by Gail Duff. I'd always had an interest in plants, but this sparked my fascination off for plants with a use. I was hooked, I taught myself hedgerow medicines, and with the help of Latin, the names stuck. Colloquial names, they work, but they only work in their own area. My great-granny would send my dad, his brothers and cousins out picking samputh and soursobs. Samputh is marsh samphire, which is Salicornia europaea, and soursobs is sorrel, Rumex acetosa. Dad knew what he was looking for, so the common names work to an extent, but they are not universal. With Victorian plant hunters introducing exotics, and with our climate changing, what can grow here is getting broader and broader, so what can help with this is the universal botanical language. Plant names can give us so much. They can tell us about how a plant grows, the conditions it likes, whether it's useful, medicinal, edible, and so on. Sometimes they get called Latin names, and this is quite misleading because they're not necessarily purely Latin. They can be Greek, they can be Sanskrit, Old Germanic, they can be a whole mixture of things. So here's a few. We have Montana. Any ideas? Yes, grows in a mountainous region. Aquatica, water, yeah, water plant. Anyone know what eusitatisima means? If something is issima, it means very. Eusitatisima is very useful. So flax, for example, is Linum eusitatissimum. It's a very useful plant. You get linoleum from it, and you get linen and so on. Next ones we have purpurea, purple, yeah. Edulis, edible. Officinalis. No, not that. It means medicinal, and it literally means of the apothecary shop. So if any plant name has officinalis in it, it's a medicinal plant. Last one, arborea. Yeah, so it's a tree-like plant. Well done. That's good. My favourite has to be Lamium galliobdylon. Galliobdylon means smells like a weasel. This is just to demonstrate the naming of plants. So it gives you an idea of literally any living organism has a name that's very much, well, like plants, basically. So other knowledge. Can you make weapons? Can you fish? If not, get friendly with someone who can and learn quickly now. Tie knots. It's well worth learning some medicinal plants while you're at it. So here's a few. These are very good for an apocalypse, by the way. We've got yarrow, which is Achillea millefolium. This is really good to stop bleeding. Feverfew, Tanacetum parthenium, great for headaches. Meadowsweet, Filipendula ulmaria. This is basically pure aspirin, so salicylic acid. And then the last one, plantain, Plantago species, is really good for zombie bites. Tip 3, read the land. The landscape can give us so much, and we just have to scratch the surface for it to give us clues on survival. 3 examples. So, if you can recognize channeled rack seaweed, you will never be cut off on a rising tide. This seaweed grows in the splash zone, which is the highest point that the sea would come up to. So even on a high spring tide, the sea will never come up beyond that point. If you are out walking on the cliffs and you find a patch of field mushrooms really near the cliff edge, put your back to the sea, be careful, don't lean backwards, and look inland, because the onshore winds can carry the spores, and then therefore if you walk away from the cliffs, you can potentially find more field mushrooms. If you follow the phases of the moon, full moons and new moons are when you get spring tides occurring, which means you get the biggest fluctuation of sea levels. So on a really low spring tide, you can actually get to seaweeds that normally grow in the subtidal zones, so sugar kelp and sea spaghetti. Look up, look down. I look everywhere, I especially look on the ground to see if I spot clusters of hazelnuts, ash keys, sweet chestnuts. I therefore know what trees are growing above me, no doubt laden with more delicious edibles. If you recognize certain plants, they can actually help you discover things. So, for example, if you can spot water mint, Mentha aquatica, or if you can recognize toxic plants like hemlock water dropwort, both of these are marginals and they love growing pretty much in or next to water, so you can potentially find a water source. In reverse, if you go to specific areas, so if you go to an estuary, hedgerow, places like that, you'll actually know what plants you're going to find there, so you can work it in reverse. This will become second nature, and before you know it, you'll be reading the landscape. So you're beginning to build an edible map in your head, which means you'll be going back to the same spots year after year during certain months to get the best pickings. This could be your only downfall, but only if it's a zombie apocalypse and they are the smart type, who will know where you're going to be and when. So mix it up, keep exploring new areas, and keep them on their gangrenous toes. Tip 4, don't get complacent. Complacency could get you killed. Run fast. And don't rely on common names. They can be so misleading. Has anyone ever heard of boneflower? No, me neither. Boneflower is daisies, common daisies. It's another name for it, something I'd never heard of. So Bellis perennis. These 3 I've picked out because I think they sound really tasty, but wait and see what they are. So we've got blue rocket. This is monkshood. This is Aconitum napellus. This plant is so toxic that if you're handling it, you can actually get poisoned by just touching it. Australian carrot fern. This is hemlock. This is Conium maculatum. And last one, dwayberry. That sounds quite nice. Yeah, a deadly nightshade. So this is Atropa belladonna. So don't go on common names. When it comes to fungi, there's no rule of thumb. I've heard people say often, oh, you can go on the gill colour, you can go on what it's growing on. You cannot do that, but you can use these to work out identification. Who wants to play a game? Yes, okay. Everybody stand up. My game is edible or deadable. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 mushrooms, just the common names, and I want you to raise your hand if you think it's edible, raise your hand if you think it's deadable, so I'll do it slowly. So, weeping widow. Who thinks this is edible? Okay. Who thinks this is deadable? Okay, everyone who said weeping widow was deadable, you guys need to sit down. Okay, stay standing if you said edible. That's taken a lot out, actually, hasn't it? Weeping widow is an edible mushroom. Okay, so those still standing. Yellow drop milk cap. Who thinks this is edible? Okay, who thinks this is deadable? Those who said edible, sit down. This is a poisonous one. Okay, so deceivers. Who thinks deceivers are edible? Okay, who thinks deceivers are deadable? Okay, so whoever said deadable, you guys need to sit down. This is an edible one, you can eat it raw. Okay, the death trumpet, trumpet des morts. Who thinks this is edible? Okay, who thinks this is deadable? If you said deadable, sit down. Okay, this is actually one of the most tasty ones you can find. Right, last one, brown roll rim. Is this edible? You can say edible, are you? Okay, what about deadable? Okay, everyone who said edible, sit down. That's pretty good. So the brown roll rim was once believed to be edible, but it's a really toxic mushroom, but it has an accumulative poison. So you wouldn't die straight away, but you will do eventually. So well done, everyone who survived that. That was good. Okay. All fungi are edible. Some fungi are only edible once. This isn't technically true because the term edible means non-toxic, but you get the sentiment. So stick with what you know. Get good identification books. Hire me. My mission is to arm people with knowledge, to break down barriers, to inspire people to have a go, and to do it with the least impact on the environment. Looking at mushrooms, what you tend to do when you're picking mushrooms is go through a mental checklist. So if I pick a mushroom, first of all, I'll look to see if it has spores, tubes, spines, gills. And that categorizes it quite quickly. Then you can go on what the cap is like. Is it scaly? Is it slimy? If you break a bit off, does it exude a milky sap? Does it change color when it's bruised? Is there a ring on the stem? Has it got a smell? What's it growing on? Has it got a bulbous base? All of these help work out and narrow down what the fungus is. So that is the mental checklist. I remember finding the most amazing patch of horse mushrooms. So they're basically like field mushrooms, but giant ones. I picked a few. I'd done all the checks, so gone through my mental checklist, put them in a bag, and carried on my walk. When I got back to the car, I had a look in the bag, and all the caps had turned yellow. This is normal. I know this because I've read about it, and I'd done all the checks, but I could not get it out of my head. Have I picked yellow stainers? So yellow stainers are agaricus, like horse mushrooms, so in the same family. But when you break or crush the stem, they will stain up yellow very, very quickly. I couldn't face eating them. It was not worth the risk, and I wasn't 100% sure. When collecting, I quite often will use a basket, and I aim to only pick edibles. But if you're collecting mushrooms, you do have to be careful. There's some seriously toxic ones out there, like Destroying Angel. If you're collecting them for identification, so taking them home to ID them, try and keep them separate, because if you have one toxic mushroom, if fragments are breaking off, You can potentially get them lodged in edible ones, and you can potentially die. So be careful. So just take your time. It's not a rush. Go for the top 10 edible, most easily identifiable mushrooms. Learn them well, and at your own pace, just gradually gain the knowledge. It's not a rush at all. So keep your running shoes on, just in case the zombies are fast. We've seen these films. My dad, when he was a little boy, well, not a little boy, but he used to do chemistry experiments in his shed, and he always kept his running shoes on, just in case one went wrong and he had to exit quickly. So, tip 5. We don't just have to survive, we can thrive and enjoy it. Did anyone have the mushroom-shaped cookies earlier? Yeah? Did you like them? Excellent. So they, it wasn't a toxic mushroom or anything. They had magnolia petals in, which taste like ginger. They had hogweed seeds in, which have an orange and cardamom flavour, and ash key seeds, which are like nutmeg. So I only used wild spices in them. The flavours can be incredible, and they're literally right on our doorstep. There's a primal joy from being out in the elements. It doesn't matter if it's the middle of the winter, blowing a hoolie. It nourishes you. It's so good. I love this. Our bodies benefit from eating seasonally. Going out on adventures, so going and picking blackberries and getting scratched by brambles, it's all part of the adventure. Watching kids explore nature for the first time and trying things, I just absolutely love it. You can be a badass forager, but you don't have to be. It really doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you live. This is for you. Follow my rules, and we can survive this apocalypse. But we don't have to wait for an apocalypse. We can do this now. Thank you.